Hi, I'm Jarrett Fuller. Welcome to Scratching the Surface. In some ways, the designers who interest me the most, the design work that I find most fascinating, the design work that lingers in my mind, comes from the designers who have some kind of coherent body of work. Now, I don't mean a signature style or a set of tropes they use over and over, but something deeper, something that's a little bit harder to explain. There's an energy to the work, a particular way of seeing the world, an approach to the work that is made manifest in the design decisions itself. You can see in some way the designer's hand in the project. And what's really interesting to me are the designers who can do that, who can make their way of thinking legible in the work, regardless of the project, regardless of who it's for and where it lives, regardless of whether they're worked alone or in a team. That to me is the marker of a specific type of designer, one who can insert themselves into a project and bring something to it that only they can. This is what I was thinking about as I spent time with the new book from Mac Books called Art Applied. Edited by Freddie Fishley and Niels Olson, this nearly 900-page book documents the work of Petra Blaisse and her studio Inside Outside. With Inside Outside, Petra's focused her work on interiors, on textiles and gardens, designing massive curtains and idiosyncratic interior and exterior spaces. She's known for her long-running collaborations with Rem Koolhaas and OMA, where she's worked with them since the 1980s, often intervening, subverting, and distorting the built environment. This new book collects texts and images from hundreds of projects that range in scale, scope, medium, and teams. Some are small teams that she's leading, and others are where the studio is hired by a bigger architecture firm or a builder. Yet despite this, regardless of the context, there's something that ties this body of work together. So I am honored today to be joined by Petra to talk about all of this. I was really interested in how she thinks about her role working within larger teams, how she thinks about collaboration, and how she knows when the team is working together in the right way. But I was also interested in how she thinks about this body of work that she's been a part of for the last almost 50 years. What ties it together? And perhaps more importantly, how is she able to identify what she and her team can bring to a project, making it an inside-outside project? We begin, though, talking about why she thinks of this work, this body of work that she's put together, less as design and more as something that she defines as applied art. If you like what we do here, please consider supporting us on our Substack. We have a free monthly newsletter that's filled with design news, updates on previous guests, and books roundups. And we also have a paid tier that features bonus content like exclusive interviews every month. You can head over to our website to sign up and help support the ongoing production of the show. Thank you for listening, and here is my conversation with Petra Blaisse. I kind of want to start actually talking about the framing of this new book of yours, this book of your work. The book is called Art Applied, and that seems like to me a callback to your very first job at the Stedelijk Museum in 1978, where you were in the Department of Applied Arts. And this idea of applied arts comes up in this book again and again and again. And I'm wondering about your relationship to that term. What does applied arts mean to you? How do you think about the applied arts?
I think about applied art as a creative answer to necessities on a very specific site or a very specific moment, let's say, or according to a very specific program that we call in architecture program. You get a program from your client or from the architect that you work with or from whoever you work with. What should be solved? It's usually something that needs to be technically solved. Either it's a spatial thing or a sound or light or, well, you can imagine. Or, of course, it's a public space outside and it needs to answer to all kinds of things and have certain functions you can imagine. And that is what I call applied art. Although in the applied art department where I was an assistant when I was very young, like early 20s, that was, of course, also ceramics, the crafts and jewelry and glass but it was also photography and graphic design and architecture and industrial design. So industrial design to me is design because it's about series that are produced in series and that can be bought by different public. But crafts is, of course, also applied in my point of view because it's a unique piece each time. So that is for me the difference. And that's why I hate the word hate between brackets, designer, because I don't feel as a designer. And in that sense, I feel applied, our work is really applied in the sense that how I would explain the word.
That's really interesting to me, and it sets up my next question a little bit because I was curious to hear you talk more about the tension or the divergence of applied art and design, or artist and designer. In the intro to the book, the editors Freddie Fishley and Niels Olson write, "We read Inside Outside's work as a renaissance of the applied arts, as a practice that opposes the increasingly dominant domain of design." And I was really interested in that idea of opposing, or the opposition. Can you tell me how you think about that? How do you think about, I guess there's this idea of responding to something, this singular nature, but tell me more about your distaste or your hate, in quotes, for design and why applied arts feels closer to you.
Now, I love design sometimes, but
Me too.
I love a beautiful chair by, but I oppose it, or I have a distaste for this very obedient objects that are asked for by a production company because it needs to sell. And I've tried a few times to work with companies such as textile production, like Knoll or Maharam, and I'm just not thinking in the same language. So I always want to reinvent the wheel, and I want to break boundaries or go through possibilities and propose not a pattern or something that repeats itself, but something that is, I don't know, larger than the cloth or different from, and so that's always a tension. And so it never happens because I'm not thinking commercially enough and just don't get it. I get it, but I don't get the solution to it.
Right. I mean, so is it, and I promise we won't spend this whole conversation talking about the definition of applied arts, but I'm fascinated by these subtle differences, because one of the things I was thinking about, which now hearing your answer, I think was actually a wrong assumption on my part, is that there, with applied arts, perhaps there's something more than just being functional or just solving a problem or responding to the program. That in some way, that's, with design, a lot of times that's it. It just ends with the solution, the program, the response, and that maybe applied arts is something more than that. That it is doing that, but it is also making a statement. It's going beyond the cloth, to use your metaphor. Does that resonate with you at all? That there is,
it resonates, but I don't think we are both right, because people like Hella Jongerius or Marcel Banders, these famous Dutch designers, they also make more than a vase or more than a lamp or more than a couch. So it also is not only, uh, it's not a brown object or it's really an artistic object in that sense, crafted,
Exactly.
but it's very sellable and it's very small. You can carry it around and put it in your house. Not so much the sofa, but you know what I mean. So it's also more than just answering to the technical requirements. So it's hard to find in any case, the thing is that we are very much architecture connected and urban planning
Yeah.
and public space. So it's another subject. I'm sometimes jealous and I think, oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if we can find an object that really sells well and then we can finally earn some money here at
Right.
Inside Outside. But we always make objects that we give to people and then that's
Yeah.
it.
Yeah. Well, well, let me ask you this then, because I think I was listening to, it was that interview with Matthew that we mentioned before we hit record. You said in that conversation that in looking at this new book of all of your work, you could see a coherent signature across every project, that your hand in some way was visible. And I don't think you actually said this. I think I read this in your voice, but you almost seemed surprised by that in some way. At least that was my reading of you responding to that. And I'm wondering how you define that signature. What is the thing that connects all of your work, or what is the set of questions that guide all of this? Where if you're not making something that's mass producible, you're not making something that's going to make you a lot of money, you're responding to these individual things, yet there's still something that connects all of them as a body of work. How do you think about that? What does that look like to you?
Yeah, it's not that every project,
Right.
when I talked to Matthew, I met more the kind of charisma or something.
Mm-hmm.
There is some energy in everything. And that energy and that colorfulness and that also graphic quality,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
which you might recognize.
Yeah.
It's a
We'll
lot
talk about
about,
that later. Don't worry.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's a lot about light and breaking through
Mm,
given limitations, both physical and mentally, uh, and the fantasy behind it, uh,
mm,
the 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 conceptual idea behind it is somehow it has a certain power, I think. And even the projects that I thought, well, you have projects that are less,
yeah. Yeah.
you believe less in. I mean, that
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
We always collaborate. We always have a team. We always have lots of projects at the same time. You don't put the same energy or you don't get the same energy from the other
Mm-hmm.
side. And then
Mm-hmm.
afterwards you think, mwah, it's okay, but not really proud of. And the funny thing working with Niels and Fredi was that sometimes they really saw something in something I didn't
Mm-hmm.
recognize, and the other way around. And so we had these discussions all the time, like, why is this worth showing? Sometimes it was because of the story, so the text
Mm-hmm.
writing,
Mm-hmm.
the writing about what was the thought behind it, or something about the process, or something funny, or
Right.
and sometimes it was actually the project itself that was much more convincing to outsiders, as it were, than to me as a
That's
involved
interesting.
person. Yeah. So that was actually part of the energy of the book, is also because of this enormously close collaboration between the graphic designer, Theo Schieferli, and
Mm-hmm.
those two curators, editors, and myself. So the four of us
Right.
were all the time in discussion, as we are now, you and me,
Right.
about why this and why not that. And this should be shorter. This could be longer. This is much more interesting than we thought. Let's go for it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Tell tell me more about how you think about collaboration. That is so central to how you talk about your work. It's obviously central to the studio. We've already been talking about the give and take of collaboration in this conversation, and I'm I'm curious. I'm trying to figure out the best way to ask this question. I'm curious how you think about that energy or that charisma that you were just talking about when you are working within the constraints and opportunities of collaboration. You have the clients, you have the architects or the urban planners who are sometimes hiring you to do a piece of a bigger project. How do you think about where you fit in and how you do what you do within that larger set of conversations?
Yeah, if we don't fit in, it doesn't work. And sometimes we don't fit in, and then we say, better not
Mm,
continue. But fitting in doesn't mean you always agree with each other. Fitting in is the collaboration to me is maybe because I'm not an artist. I always need this ping pong. The
mm,
ping pong of an engineer that all of a sudden says, but we can also hang it, or we can also
right,
stretch it, or an
right.
architect that says, well, we can also shift the building a bit to the left or the right
Mm,
by way of saying, or because you want a window there, well, maybe not a bad idea. So it's always this pulling and pushing between people's specialism, but also character, I guess, because there's all there. That's fitting in is also a bit about flexibility and openness to each other's, yeah, to each other's creativity and intelligence. And so that's why we're also not asked by all architects, because many architects are afraid of our, or not our, but someone's outer force all of
right.
a sudden influencing their project. So with OMA, of course, I was very lucky in the beginning. It was me as an individual. Then
Right.
we became more inside outside. That in Rem Koolhaas and his generation mentality, he's also interested in that input.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Really, really
Yeah. Yeah.
triggered to go further, triggered to make it even more, yeah, deep or yeah,
Yeah.
valuable because of all these intelligences that come together, whether creative intelligence or other forms of intelligence. And so talking and text and communication is very important. And I see our role as inside outside, I always say, as quite a diplomatic one,
Mm,
because you're
mm-hmm.
in between a lot of parties. We are sometimes the leading party. So then we are the ones that
Right.
ask people in, like scientists or biologists or gardeners or carpenters or, photographers
Right.
or lighting specialists. Anyway, then we are kind of the coordinating party. But
Yeah.
usually we are asked by others, and then we need to, yeah, diplomatically, yeah, have patience and also a bit of stubbornness and a bit of humor and a bit of,
Yeah.
to
Yeah.
get somewhere.
Yeah.
And sometimes I already, or we as a team, or somebody already has a very strong instinct, and then it's
Mm-hmm.
totally undermined, as it were, in a process.
Yeah.
But then slowly it comes back. And all these processes are actually quite interesting to go through. But these projects usually take like years.
Yeah.
Architectural projects and urban projects take 4 years, 7 years, 10 years.
Right.
So it's a kind of like a river going through your life. And these people that you work with go with you.
Yeah.
And sometimes they're gone and there's new ones. So this whole process is quite something, I must say.
I have two questions about that because I think that's the way you're talking about that is really interesting to me. And I'm curious if there's a difference in how you think about the work. And I'm going back to that word charisma that you used earlier, or the energy, the exchange of energy between different parties, is there a difference for you if you are the leading and commissioning party, who is then inviting others, versus if you are being invited in by someone else? Does that change how you think about the project or how you approach the project or work on a project?
Not in a very big way, no.
Okay.
Because if I'm asked by others, we also invite others. I think it changed in the course of time. When I
Mm,
was young and more unexperienced, I was of course very much in a way happy to have this
right.
other role so that I was protected by this whole structure around me. It's also protecting, huh? Because you react to something from coming from the outside. Whereas if you lead the book, everything comes from you and you need to inspire others and, yeah, organize others,
Right.
manage others. But that became more and more as we grew up as a studio, as a team, it got more and more equal.
I want to come back to the studio growing, but I have one other quick question, just responding to what you said earlier about when someone asks you to join a project and it doesn't fit and you don't fit in. And I have a two-part question there. What does not fitting in look like to you? How do you know that you're not going to fit in? It sounds like there's that some of that is that sort of anti-diplomatic rigidity that maybe you can sort of sense. And then the sub question is, how early in your career were you able to figure out that you don't fit into certain projects? How did you like develop that skill to discern that? You know what I mean?
Yes, and it's a very good question because not immediately, of course.
Right.
Yeah, because if you begin to be independent and you have a slight prediction or premonition that you have something to say,
Yeah.
something creative to add, which is totally not clear yet, then you're not very critical, of course. You
Right.
say yes to everything.
Right. Exactly.
Exactly. And sometimes you gets you makes you incredibly unhappy and you think why or it makes you very heavy that you just cannot come up with the right you
Mm-hmm.
know thing.
Mm-hmm.
And as you grow up, you recognize these signs a bit sooner.
Mm.
So if somebody asks you just for protocol and they are actually already completely decided and there's actually no space for
Right.
interaction, then we don't fit.
Right.
That
Right.
doesn't mean we don't fit in, we just
Right.
don't fit.
Right.
So,
Right.
and then I would rather not lose any time on something. And also, I think they shouldn't lose time on us.
Yeah.
So,
That's exactly why I asked that question, because as you were talking about that, I was reflecting on the early part of my career, and especially the part where I was working by myself independently, and how many projects I took on just because I was afraid that another one wouldn't come along or I needed the money, and I had not yet developed that criticality to understand what I bring and what I don't bring and where I fit. And I feel like that's such a hard thing to learn. You can only learn that on the job. And so I was kind of curious how you thought about
yeah,
that. And it sounds like that was a slow process for you too.
on the job. And what is, of course, a pity is that if you're naive and still not very trained, you also don't think about money. You
Right.
just want to get the experience. Yeah. And that's
Right.
also how you learn. I mean,
Yeah.
so and now I think it's really a pity. There are now two partners at Inside
Hmm. Hmm.
Outside, Aura Melis and Jana Crepon since 2016. And together we need to manage this place. And of course, I'm very happy I'm not alone anymore managing this place, but I have now two partners, and we always have to think about money, which is such a pity, but it's necessary.
Right.
We
Because
need
now
to
you have
think
a team
about
that you need to support too.
exactly. There are 12, 14 people working here. So it's not much, but they need their salary every month and the rent and the
Right.
computers and well, I don't need to
Yeah.
tell you. So it's about contracts, about legal security, that you don't take too much risk, and about money. And in between that, we want all three of us to be extremely creative and take our time to make the best of each project. And
Yeah.
that is a very
Yeah.
difficult balance to find. And sometimes we find it and sometimes not.
So
Yeah.
this is exactly what my next question was going to be, because you started your career independent. You were talking about this independence. You started Inside Outside as a studio in 91. You brought on two partners in 2016, like you said. There's now 12 of you. Uh, how does that change your position in the work? Do you see your role differently now than you did in, say, 2016 or in 91, where now you are part of a team that is always working together? There are all these other external factors, but I imagine what you do and what you bring to the team then also changes. How has that changed, or how has that evolved for you?
Very much so. So I actually started to work as a freelance exhibition designer in '86, exhibition and interior
Hmm.
designer. And in '91, I had to subscribe my studio, but I didn't have anyone working with me. And that was '91. So I invited people to work with me on a freelance basis
Mm.
or on, you know, and then in '98, I really found a place and was able to invite people to really come and work with me. So first we were one, and then two, and then three.
Mm.
You know how it
Yeah.
goes.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's changed since 2016, of course, because one of the reasons I wanted to invite people to become partner. By the way, they already worked with me for years. So I knew Jana and Aura. Aura had come and gone and come and gone and freelance. And she always said, I only want to come back as a partner. And at a certain point, I said, okay, that's a good idea.
Yeah. I love
But
that.
in any case, it changes now because I feel more free to
Mm.
be again really as the creative that goes from project to project.
Yeah.
And Jana and Aura and Peter Niesen, who does with me all the curtains,
Hmm.
all the textiles, the three of them, and also Nafsika that you just met, they all manage teams. They manage the projects. So I basically don't manage projects anymore. So
Okay.
that's a real liberation for me. I can really go from one to the other. We have discussions about aesthetics, about technical solutions, as far as I have experience, because I'm already older. So I
Yeah.
have, it's some things more experience.
Yeah.
And so I can really put it in. And that's a very nice role to have.
Do you think that that new role for you and the team around yourself, has that changed the output of the studio in any legible way? Obviously, there's a scale that is possible with a team as opposed to working by yourself. But do you think the work itself has changed in some way with a new type of internal collaboration that you didn't always have before?
Um, it's more changed because of outside influences,
Mm.
because of COVID, because of the climate change, because of the panic of how to improve the world, how to be more healthy, how to
Yeah.
change cities, how to uh, take the biology of things more serious. We have different kinds of commissions through
Okay.
time, much
Yeah.
more into landscape.
Hmm.
We were very much more into using textiles in architecture, whether as curtains or walls, floors, ceilings, anything,
Hmm.
and exhibition design. And we had sometimes, of course, a park or a private garden, which is great.
Yeah.
But now it's more and more the cities that ask us for advice, or
Ah,
we work on municipal existing parks to improve its functionality. We are asked, or we won a competition in Geneva with Stefano Bueri and Metrogramma and Laura Gatti to make a public park under this bridge of
okay.
Renzo Piano. And that's a completely industrial area that has enormous environmental problems with water,
Mm,
inundations that really whole cars are taken away and it's enormously polluted, etc. And so we are then really the ones who want to break open everything,
yeah.
take out the poison, put new earth in, put
Okay.
vital soil and water.
Yeah.
So it's very exciting, but it's different.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you brought that up because I wanted to talk to you a bit about gardens and about landscaping. And so I lived in New York for most just this is just some context for this set of questions. I lived in New York for most of my adult life and moved to North Carolina 3 years ago, and for the first time in my adult life had an outdoor space. And over the last couple of years, have gotten very, very deeply interested in gardens, in landscaping, growing vegetables all summer, thinking
Good
about
for
flowers
you.
all the time. It's what I think. It's like what I think about all the time now, instead of what I should be thinking about. Um, and I'm curious about how you think about or what it means to you to design a garden. And I realize that sounds like a dumb question, but I'm thinking about everything we've been talking about. And it strikes me that a garden, in many ways, is actually like the perfect encapsulation of how you think about your work, because you are not just responding to something with an object, but you are creating a program that will change over time, over years, over decades. And so, how do you think about that entry into a space that will evolve with the ecology, with the environment? That seems to me very different than designing an interior space where there is something a little bit more fixed and rigid. Am I making too big of a difference there, or how do you think about that?
No, it's an enormous difference. Yeah, it's an enormous difference. If you are passionate gardener like you are now, and
Yeah,
I've
right.
always been, I inherited it from my mother, I
Mm,
suppose, and her family, is that when you see an outside space, you immediately have this fantasy.
uh-huh.
Well, if it's barren and horrible looking, not if it looks amazing, then you just enjoy it. And you pick up all kinds of ideas of combinations of plants or
Yeah,
trees and
yeah, yeah.
undergrowth and blah blah. But if you can really start all over, you have this incredible fantasy of what could happen there and what could live there and what life could be attracted there, by planting the right
Right.
combination of things that bloom and fruit and blah blah, all that. Um, so it's very exciting. It's a prediction, and
Mm,
it's a prediction of what you hope will manifest itself and would remain alive and grow happily,
mm-hmm.
creating a kind of paradise, basically, to make people happy, but also to make animals happy, to make the
Right.
plants happy, and to make the soil life happy. In other words, totally naive dreaming. It's a bit dreaming.
Yeah.
Whereas an interior, indeed, it's more fixed, it's more strategic, it has to do with taste, with with doability, but I don't know how to say that in English. And with curtains in that scale, it's really a composition, it's really a piece.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It's like a painting almost. You have to look for the right materials and combinations and techniques. And then if you have everything together, you make it and it's there.
Right.
Whereas gardens is really only in your mind, and you have to go back and compose the ingredients to get it done.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then it starts. And then you have to look every day how it develops.
Right. Right. I mean, that seems, there was a line I was trying to figure out as I was thinking about you and thinking about this conversation and spending time with the book. I was trying to figure out what the overlap was between the curtains and the gardens. And in Rem Koolhaas, in his sort of transcript of his presentation that's included in the book, has this line where he says you can't control a garden and you can't control a curtain when the windows are open or something like that, that
Yeah,
there's
yeah.
this sort of uncontrollability, and that feels like a metaphor for design generally to me, or at least how you approach design. This sort of you plant the seeds, and I say that metaphorically. You set up the framework, but then it lives in the world. People
Yeah,
interact with it. It moves. The windows are open. The curtains move. The garden grows. New animals come in. How,
yeah. People manipulate the curtain
yeah, yeah,
all the time, or the theater technicians, or yeah.
yeah. Has working on gardens and in gardens and being very acutely aware of that uncontrollability, has that changed your approach to design, or has that influenced how you think about design?
I wish it would have, then I wouldn't be so eager to watch everything every day. No, again, I think what is now in fashion, I call it in fashion, it sounds a bit condescending, but what is now in the air is that nature has to be invited into the city, right?
Mm,
And to invite nature into the city, there's this whole movement to let it go
yeah,
and to not control the pieces of earth between two highways, or and which is beautiful, all of a sudden you have wild plants everywhere. And but it's also indeed in the architecture now as if you see the city as a mountain range, and every building is a mountain, and you get this whole Humboldt idea that okay, we have a mountain, and as you go up it gets another
right,
climate and another condition, and of course
right.
different views and different. But so what we now are trying to do is create
Mm,
conditions of from the soil, from the water to the mud, to the soil, to the first terrace, to the first flat roof, or maybe there's a crevice. Architects also now start to influence the shape of their building
yeah.
so that nature can settle. So you have facades that have
Mm,
openings, and people can nest, but also birds and
hmm.
bats and
Yeah,
you know snakes
yeah,
maybe, or
yeah,
whatever. And so it's fascinating from a biological and ecological point of view, and we have an excuse now to invite all these specialists to talk with us and to work with us on these kind of projects. In Basel we worked with architects, of course, but also a guy who knows everything about bees,
mm,
and he wanted us to create environments for all these bees from Switzerland who would all come to this garden of ours,
yeah.
because certain plants and would flower there. So fascinating, but not so much design anymore.
Yeah, I mean, this speaks to something that I've been thinking a lot about in my own garden. Maybe you can help me help me figure this out.
We can give advice.
Because I think what you're saying is exactly right, and I love what you were saying earlier about the garden and the landscape isn't just for the human, it's also for the bees and the birds and the soil and the plants, and it is really thinking about it ecologically, as a system.
As a
And
connected system. Yeah.
exactly. And so much of design is, or like the buzzword in design, or at least in my spaces of design, is this idea of human centered. We think about this with industrial design, about ergonomics. How do you make the human the most comfortable? Or how does the human do the thing they need to do? And with a garden, you can't do that. that like it's impossible to prioritize the human. And I don't know, is there a lesson there for us in thinking about the world and sustainability and climate in deep, lowering the human to be equal with all of these? I don't know this is, what do you think about who these things are for and how we think about who these things are for?
Well, that's one of the big questions that we talked about in the beginning.
Yeah.
I also, in the book, I question it, how far
Right.
can you go to
Right.
create wilderness in an urban setting?
Mhm. Mhm.
How many humans could really enthusiastically react to this? Oh, I might encounter a wolf, or
Yeah.
if I open the window, lots of, you know, viruses and animals can come in, and you don't know.
Mhm.
Are we ready for that, or are we exaggerating out of a reaction to, of
Yeah.
course, the urgency of environmental crisis that we are in? I think what is best for us and what we are also doing is to go down again to the technique,
Mm.
and that you say, okay, cities get much too warm. Part of the warmth is also because we are more and more urban, more
Right.
and more um hard surfaces.
Mhm.
So it's all asphalt and concrete and stone, and it all, takes up the heat. And so that's part of our role to, if you can introduce porosity, nature is not only a plant, it can also be sand or pebbles or water, anything, soil, obviously. If you create porosity, that heat, that there is a good water management that cools things, and heat can go in and CO2 can be absorbed, and
Right.
then already you are helping the climate as well,
Yeah.
without creating wilderness necessarily, to go to the other end of the
Yeah.
whole scope.
Right.
And if you have a sweet garden somewhere in London where you have apple trees, and then you're also helping.
Right.
So
Right.
we're searching for the right equilibrium also there. But for the mind, it's super exciting to go
Yeah.
all the way
Yeah.
and then go down again, and have these discussions. And what we are now doing, you can always interrupt that.
Yeah. No,
Uh,
please keep going.
what we a few years ago thought this soil study was very important,
Oh,
getting
right.
more important because of this urban request, also of the European Union,
Yeah.
saying architecture should not only have sustainable energy sources and water management, but they should also see to it that there is vital soil.
Mm.
Um, we were thinking, okay, we work so much with engineers, architects, developers, and so on, who have no idea about what is going on underground.
Right.
Let's concentrate on that. And
Huh.
so first we were doing a whole magazine as guest editors. The title was Underground.
Mm.
We were asked by a certain cell of the Amsterdam municipality to join them in making a book on collaboration between vital soil and infrastructure. How these two, and root systems of trees
Mm.
and plants, and
Yeah.
of course
Yeah.
everything that goes with it, how it can be a collaborative thing and not two different things that are totally not in touch. And that was also interesting. And then we thought, okay, we are an artistic studio. Why don't we make a drawing of the underground? Why don't we make it a visual thing? And then we got in touch, of course, with Wageningen University, and they already make underground film. They have cameras, and you can see roots grow, and you can see, all these fungi and these
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know the English word. Uh, so there is already something, but it's all divided. They are in their little corner, we are in
Right.
our little corner, and they have their scientific magazines,
Right.
but not in the art magazine or not in the.
Right.
So what we are now doing is inviting all these
Uh,
crazy nerds and people at our table,
yeah.
and we started to draw. We said, okay, so what does this fungi look like? And what does it do? And what is this springtail? What does it look like? And
Mm,
what's its function? So now we have made a basic drawing,
uh,
and it travels. It travels to an exhibition about sustainability in Rotterdam, in Switzerland, because it gives some kind of beautified slightly
yeah.
uh, inspiration to people who not usually pay attention how important the first 30 centimeters of soil is.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
happens underneath, also very interesting, but the
Right.
first layer, and how can you, and you know, how do things degrade and create new life and then sink
Yeah.
into the ground, and
Yeah.
super,
Yeah.
I can talk about it or look at it all my life, but
Well,
so we're introducing something completely new into this team.
yeah. I mean, there are a lot of things I like about that, but what really interested me about that was the idea of, and I'm using air quotes here, beautifying it, making it graphic, making it visible in some way. And as we head into the end of the conversation, I do want to return to the graphic quality of your work that you mentioned
Mhm.
earlier. And there's a lot of writing in this new book about drawing and the role of drawing. And interspersed throughout the book, you have these collages that you refer to as posters. And I was really interested in these, what you're calling posters, and generally this use of collage in your work. Collage is both a process for you, it seems like, but also an output. It is the end. Um, tell me about the role of collage in your work, or the importance of collage.
Well, I think it's the same as collaboration.
Yeah.
You have an instinct that you want to say something or visualize something, and then you look at different things, magazines, newspapers, whatever you find, pieces of colored paper, I don't know,
Hmm.
and you start to be influenced by what you find.
Yeah.
It's actually a, how do you call it? Yeah, found things that you
Yeah.
put together in another way.
Yeah.
You tear it, you cut it, you make new words. You have a text, but you turn all the letters around, you have a
Right.
new word.
Right.
Um, you use the Financial Times as a background, and you discover, oh, fuck, there's Putin,
Yeah.
making a,
Yeah.
excuse the
Yeah.
word.
This is a podcast. This is okay.
Oh,
We're
I
not on
can,
we're not on the radio.
oh, I can say shit and so on. Yeah, so it's sometimes this chance of things coming together and communicating something,
Yeah.
uh, and then somebody else sees it and says, "Oh, but I discover something totally different in this. You think you
Yeah.
said that, but actually, I see something else." So that to me is really exciting, and that's also a thing that has to do with our work. It's also about
Mm.
chance and changeability and
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
decay and life, and
Mm-hmm.
all these things come together. And yeah, I also made a collage for the Stedelijk Museum garden, as you have seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, and that's also, I have then the plants or the colors or the structures
Yeah.
in my mind, and then I look for them and I put them all, cut it out and put them all in front of each other. And that creates an atmosphere. And
Yeah.
that atmosphere and is what you want to communicate at that moment.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. I hadn't even made the connection to gardening, but you talking about chance, talking about death and life, that's all the language of the garden also. And I think that what you're saying about collaboration makes a lot of sense to me. And what I think is interesting is that a collage, you are seeing disparate pieces come together, but you're also still seeing the seams. You're seeing both the process, you see how
Mm.
it's put together and the result. And I don't want to draw too many comparisons here, but you mentioned your early work with OMA at the beginning of the conversation, and collage always seems very important to me in their work and the graphic quality of their work. And it's interesting to me that so many people involved with OMA and around OMA have collage as a part of their process. Also, you do. I'm thinking about Michael Rock and Susan Sellers of 2x4 who use collage a lot also.
Mm.
Um, and yeah, I don't know. There's something about that showing the seams, showing the layers, that seems very important to how all of you in that world kind of think about your work. And maybe I'm just answering your question back, but it is that idea of collaboration, of coming together in some way.
Somehow I see that also as a form of collage. Yeah.
Yeah.
And a collage can be like what I did in the exhibitions of OMA in the beginning is really to show the public their state of mind, their
Right.
sources of inspiration, their decadence or their, I don't know, stupidity.
Right.
Not that I think they're stupid, but
Right. I know. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Rem tends to say that too. You know, you show your stupid ideas and your good ideas.
Mm,
And and this book also by Niels and Fredi had that also. They said, we also want to show ugliness. You know, you also made terribly ugly things. And say,
yeah.
yeah, that's true. So it's not only about beauty.
Yeah. Yeah.
Uh, but no, it's very funny. I know you want to end this conversation, but
I mean, I don't want to, but I know you have
of
to
course we
go.
have to.
Right.
But you know, when I started to do exhibitions, but also these curtains and interiors and gardens, people started to say, oh, yes, of course, you're all about beauty, you're a woman,
Uh,
and you bring warmth and
right.
sensuality to this cold architecture. And I started to get very irritated
Yeah.
because it's not necessarily female what we do,
Right.
or an architect is not unsensitive at all, you know. Men are also very sensitive and precise and and sensual, of course. And so we started to talk about our work more and more in technical terms
Mm,
as a form of emancipation. Like,
yeah.
okay, it's a curtain, but it does this, it does that, and it's a new invention here, and it's a new invention there. So that we forgot to talk or to actually admit that our work is also about beauty.
Well, maybe this sets up. I have two more questions for you, and I think this sets up the last two. And I like that you're talking about the language used in the book, and I'm wondering, in putting this book together, in having this dialogue between yourself with the editors, with the designer, did you learn anything about yourself from this
No.
process? No, from seeing your work together, did this change how you think about the work that you've done at all in any way?
Well, that's what I thought. Yeah, that's what I thought I said when I said I recognize through this book a kind of energy and
Yeah.
charisma.
Yeah. So
That's what I
were
learned.
you not aware of that before? I guess is the question that I'm asking. Like that was news to you too.
It was news to me too, because other
Oh.
people could say it, but you have to know it for yourself. And one of my characteristics is that I'm still very insecure. I
Ah,
always think I start at zero. And with each project, we start at zero.
yeah.
And we
Yeah.
have to again learn and again solve things and again. So it's a perpetual learning. And so this insecurity has a certain importance in a way
Yeah.
that you never think, oh, you know, I know what I'm doing. Just one and one is two. No, each time you think, oh, what is this? What I have now. And so if you look back and you find this kind of muscle
Yeah.
somehow, and also creativity and fun, because Niels and Fredi took out all the sketches that are still existing
Right.
that we could
Right.
find. All these sketches, they said, we want them in, we want them in. This is you. And I thought, oh, I forgot about all these, you know. It's all a base in the beginning. This is your view, but you're
Yeah.
sketching it. And then later you have to make it into a serious project. So that gets lost. That
Yeah.
first thing gets usually lost.
Yeah.
So that was very nice. Um, yeah, so that was what I learned from myself. And it's also about time because I'm almost 70.
Yeah.
And so this insecurity is also a bit, yeah, come on, you know, how long can you?
Well, let me ask you this as the last question. I was going to ask you the question I was going to ask you, but you started to answer it, is what keeps you interested in this? But you're talking about this learning. You're talking about constantly discovering new things, and that seems to be what keeps you interested. And so I want to change the question a little bit. I'm wondering if as you as you finish this book, you have this sort of retrospective of at this point almost 50 years of work and thinking. As you approach 70, have your ambitions changed? Is what you want to do with your work, has that changed at all as you've gotten older and moved through your career?
Yes, because I'm more aware of sustainability, of course, about
Mm,
a certain responsibility um, in the collaborations also to pass on knowledge and experience, especially, of course, with my team here. I love to continue working, but you know, it's also about transporting, transplanting. Uh, yeah, of course, we have children and grandchildren, but it's not that. But it's an awareness of that you leave something behind, and what you leave behind can all that we have made is actually temporary. And that's also what I see in this book. It's all temporary. It can all be gone within months, you know, if you just, you know, if nobody takes care of it. And with curtains, they are extremely sensitive to use and to respect. People can just take it off and throw it in the cellar. It's gone.
right.
So that also is part of the realization that nothing you make is forever
Mm,
and that it's a moment,
yeah.
and that that moment, if you write about it and if you make a book about it, it might last longer than the actual thing. And that's where graphics come in, but also language and writing.
Yeah.
You saw I wrote a lot, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I wrote about 124 projects, and we touched upon 424 projects, I think. And I wrote about 142 projects, the ones we showed, but also what was expected from us. So on the top of each project, you see a quote. A quote could be a description, but an experience or something. And then lower, you see a description, but that's also a very personal description of
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
we saw as our task. And so I think writing is really, really interesting because you have a totally different memory when you write. All of a sudden, things break open.
Yeah. Yep.
You all of a sudden remember something, or you have to look something up and you come across something else.
Yeah.
So it's a kind
Yeah.
of, you know it, right?
Yeah. 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 No,
When you
you're
write.
speaking my language. Yeah.
And so I found a new, not that I always liked writing, but also in the previous book from
Mm-hmm.
2007 that Irma Bohm designed
Yep.
and Kayoko Ota was editor. I also wrote all these project descriptions. So I really like the state of mind that you're
Yeah.
completely in a bubble almost, whereas our work is all open and
Yeah.
exchange and you know. So yeah, an interesting combination.
Yeah. Well, I think that's a really I think that's a really beautiful way to end this conversation. Petra, this was so lovely. Thank you so much for this really sort of kind of fascinating and inspiring conversation. Thank you for being on the show.
Thank you for inviting me, Jarrett.
That was my conversation with Petra Blaisse. It was recorded on October 7th, 2024. Our theme music is by Jeremiah Chu. The show is and always will be free, thanks to the generosity of listeners like you. If you like what we're doing, I hope you consider supporting us over on Substack to get some bonus content each month. You can follow us across social media at Surface Podcast, and you can listen to all of our previous episodes wherever you get your podcasts and at our website, scratchingthesurface.fm. Thanks for listening.